Villains, you gave it its best one ever. And now, I'm gonna kill you with it.
If someone were to ask me to recite Obadiah Stane's plan and motivation from the original Iron Man film, I would find it pretty difficult to nail down exactly what his reasons were for being the antagonist of the story. If I weren't a fan of the original source material, I'd probably have a really difficult time even remembering his name. Same goes for Malekith the Dark Elf from Thor 2, Ronan the Accuser from the first Guardians of the Galaxy, Justin Hammer from Iron Man 2, Alex Pierce from The Winter Soldier, and a slew of other Marvel films. Now, please don't take what I'm getting at here as a knock against Marvel specifically. The problem with expendable villains extends to pretty much every story in the modern age that uses a malevolent force as a plot device. It's become a bit of a meme that Marvel has terrible villains. Well, let me ask you this. Do you remember the villain's name from the James Bond film Quantum of Solace? Do you remember his motivation? Do you remember why he was the evil character? Whether it's a big budget franchise like Taken or The Fast and the Furious or the DCEU, modern films, in my view, have fallen short of giving us villains that truly represent an unstoppable yet understandable force for the protagonist to overcome, with a few exceptions, however. These examples, both the good and the bad, pose the question, what makes a superb villain? To answer this, I think it's worthwhile to look at the general structure of a heroic tale. There's a hero, willingly or unwillingly tasked with being a force for good, against a villain who wants to accomplish a malevolent goal. Even though this description is rather simple, when you look at pretty much every single story involving a hero, when you strip away all the other extraneous plot details, the plot can pretty much be distilled down to this exact sentence. This is why people refer to these types of films as formulaic or predictable, because the obvious attempts of the hero necessitate the flow of the plot. It's a given that the hero has to try and stop the villain. If the hero doesn't try to stop the villain, then, well, the world would have probably ended numerous times by now. So the originality of these types of films then relies on the rest of the equation, the villain. Again, the malevolent goal almost always consists of the death of innocent people, whether it's releasing a deadly virus, hijacking nuclear codes, bombing a city, and pretty much every other tire disaster movie trope. So there really isn't much originality in this front either. Where the originality lies, then, is the motivation behind the villain's malevolence. What pushes the villain towards carrying out this insane act, and why does he feel justified in doing so? Too often, movies go over the top in what a villain's plan is, and not why the villain's plan is the way it is. If a film doesn't explore the why behind a villain's evil deed, then they're just evil for the sake of being evil. And without understanding the governing principles behind a villain's motivation, the audience will just see them as an empty and vapid plot contrivance. What all this amounts to, in my view, is that a superb villain cannot just be an evil force to be squashed. They need to represent much more in the overall context of the story. They need to be a force that can only be stopped by the might of the heroes in the story. They need to be relatable. They need to be sympathetic. And while we may not have to agree with the motivations behind their dastardly plot, we have to understand them. And perhaps most importantly, the best villains become the hero of the story when the events of the tale are looked at from the villain's perspective. Now, as big as a Marvel fan as I am, I know that villains have not typically been their strong suit as of late. However, in their recent blockbuster Infinity War, Marvel seems to have taken the criticisms of their villains to heart and have truly delivered us a perfect villain in the form of Thanos. So this is a pretty bold claim, and you're probably thinking, why the hell is this pretentious asshole making such a massive claim? Well, stick with me until the end of this video, and I hope I can convince you that my claim is not an overstatement. Thanos has received a lot of praise in the recent months since the premiere of Infinity War, and it goes without saying that he is the best part of this movie. Thanos doesn't just serve as an evil force in the story, he is the main character. Aside from Josh Brolin's brilliant performance and some incredible CGI, Thanos is a triumph of both screenwriting and cinematic execution, and in my mind, there are 5 reasons that earn him the title of the perfectly written villain. Number 1, Thanos is different from the source material. This might seem counterintuitive, and I know better than most that changing a villain's origins or motivations almost always ends up disastrous.
God is all-powerful. He cannot be all good. And if he is all good, then he cannot be all-powerful.
Shut the up!
But I think the cinematic manifestation of the Mad Titan is far superior in terms of character development in relation to his comic book counterpart. And this is coming from a guy who's been a fanboy of the comics for years. But first, what is Thanos like in the original comics? From his first appearance in the comics, Thanos earned his place among Marvel's characters as one of the most powerful and sadistic forces ever conceived in the universe. Born a genetically superior yet deformed descendant of Saturn's moon Titan, Thanos, gifted with the power of an ancient race called the Deviants, became ostracized from his own people and developed a personal mantra of nihilistic destruction. He was obsessed with causing death on a massive scale, and his power clouded his vision of right and wrong. Later in the comics, Thanos stumbled upon Marvel's personification of death, appearing to him as a beautiful hooded woman. He fell in love with her, only fueling his obsession with causing death on a massive scale even more, and sought a way to truly prove his devotion to her. In the original Infinity Gauntlet storyline, Thanos, equipped with the 6 Infinity Gems, realized the only way to truly please Death was to eliminate half the life in the universe, which Death saw as out of balance. He does this by killing half of all life with the now iconic snap of his fingers. And here is where the manifestations of both the original Thanos and the cinematic Thanos are juxtaposed. They both have a common goal of committing genocide to bring balance to a universe that they see as volatile, but their motivations for eliminating half of all sentient life diverge. While the comic book Thanos aims to carry out his plan to satisfy his great love, Death, Thanos in Infinity War has a different guiding principle. He's obsessed with causing death, yes, on a massive scale, but not because he wants to attain some kind of sick pleasure out of it. He does it because he truly believes that what he does will restore balance and order to the cosmos.
It's a simple calculus. This universe is finite, its resources finite. If life is left unchecked, life will cease to exist.
As a massive fan of the source material, I can't tell you how refreshing it is to have 2 manifestations of the character and both be completely valid and believable. It goes to show that an adaptation of a character doesn't always have to be met with anxiety from fans. In fact, in some ways, it can be even better. Which leads to my next point. Number 2. Thanos' plan makes sense. This is one of the most striking aspects about Thanos, and the majority of people who saw the film seem to agree with me. In summary, Thanos seeks to unite all the Infinity Stones into the Infinity Gauntlet, ostensibly making him the master of the universe. With this power, he will be able to accomplish a singular goal.
Thanos. He invades planets, he takes what he wants, he wipes out half the population.
The entire time I knew Thanos, he only ever had one goal. To bring balance to the universe by wiping out half of all life.
When we first hear his plan through the murmurings of different characters in the beginning of the film, he comes across as just another expendable baddie that deserves to get his ass kicked by the Avengers. But through brilliant uses of flashbacks and logical exposition, we realize that Thanos is not just bringing ruin for the sake of ruin. In his mind, Thanos is the harbinger of destruction because he does not want to see the universe destroyed further. He seeks to save it.
It's a simple calculus. This universe is finite, its resources finite. If life is left unchecked, life will cease to exist.
As horrible of a method of natural resource conservation as this is, Thanos does have a point. Agree or not, he makes a compelling case for unchecked life in the universe being paradoxical to its nature. But even still, Thanos still appears as an unjustified madman until we discover the underlying trauma that has blinded his judgment.
Titan was like most planets. Too many mouths, not enough to go around. And when we faced extinction, I offered a solution.
Genocide.
They called me a madman. And what I predicted came to pass.
Once we see and hear the story of Thanos' home of Titan being destroyed due to overpopulation, the audience can't help but follow his logic. That, coupled with Thanos saving Gamora's homeworld by exterminating half of its populace, serves as a maniacal proof of concept for his actions.
Bed hungry, scrounging for scraps. Your planet was on the brink of collapse. I'm the one who stopped that. Do you know what's happened since then? The children born have known nothing but full bellies and clear skies. It's a paradise.
In his mind, Thanos believes if this method can save one world, why can't it save every world? And when you really think about it, he may even save species from extinction if his plan were carried out on a universal scale. Now, obviously, skeptics can look at his plan and say,
But if he has supreme power, why can't he just double all the resources in the universe and not murder everyone?
well, that leads into reason 3. Number 3. Thanos is flawed. This sort of goes without saying, but all villains are flawed. They have deep-seated defects that come to fruition as evil and terrifying character traits. If villains were perfectly rational people, their malevolent efforts would probably be dissuaded with a simple conversation. But in my view, the best villains are written as understandable beings that are slaves to their imperfections. Despite me heaping praise on the big purple baddie for the logic of his plan, Thanos is no different. Even though Thanos may truly see himself as an altruist and a pragmatist for his plan, part of Thanos' aspiration stems in part from his own ego. Even before he assembles the gauntlet, Thanos does believe himself to be an elemental force that is unstoppable. Mainly, he views himself as a god.
You will never be a god.
And even further, he believes that the universe will be instantaneously grateful for the mass extermination he wants to commit, and the parallels between the Bible and Thanos are pretty undeniable.
With all 6 stones, I could simply snap my fingers. They would all cease to exist. I call that mercy.
And then what?
I finally rest and watch the sunrise on a grateful universe.
But here's what the kicker is. Thanos believes that he's correct, and you don't doubt that for a second in the film. If you were to walk in Thanos' shoes, I'm sure that you would see him as the hero of his own story. A tortured warrior that seeks vindication from the past trauma of seeing his homeworld destroyed. In my eyes, Thanos doesn't truly embody the archetype of the supervillain bent on universal destruction and dominance, which can be seen in characters like Brainiac, Loki, Darkseid, and Emperor Palpatine. To me, Thanos most closely identifies with a misguided religious extremist. While he bears the character flaw of an unchecked ego and a literal god complex, Thanos lives by an ideal that he truly believes in. He's willing to destroy the fabric of reality to bring about his vision, even if it means the death of countless innocent souls, including ones he holds dear, which leads into my next point.
Did you do it?
Yes.
What did it cost?
Everything.
Number 4. Thanos suffers. A huge issue with expendable villains doesn't just stem from the fact that they are empty and vapid characters. Typically, villains that are expendable do not sacrifice in pursuit of their goal. If a villain is not willing to endure personal sacrifice, then their evil plan, no matter how horrifying, lacks emotional weight. A villain that has an evil plot can be menacing, don't get me wrong, and that has been shown by amazing villains like the Joker in The Dark Knight. This sort of villain creates an unrelenting hatred from the audience, and in this way, we strive for them to be defeated by the hero. But in order for the audience to not just hate the villain, but to be somewhat sympathetic towards them, the villain has to be ready to sacrifice in pursuit of their goal, even if the sacrifice is everything they hold dear. If I were to plot my emotional reactions towards Thanos throughout Infinity War, the two extremes would be hate and sympathy, with understanding lying smack dab in the middle of the two. From the opening moments of the film, when Thanos arrogantly proclaims his destiny, manhandles the Hulk, stabs Heimdall, and snaps Loki's neck, there is very little you can feel for the character aside from fear and hatred. As the film progresses, pivotal moments like the flashback onto Thanos' adoption of Gamora and their subsequent conversation about the dangers of an unchecked universe leads to more understanding of his psyche. Thanos is so convinced that he is correct that he is ready to give anything and everything to assemble the Infinity Stones to carry out his plot. He remarks on this repeatedly throughout the film.
It needs correction.
You don't know that!
I'm the only one who knows that. At least I'm the only one with the will to act on it. I take it the Maw's dead. This day extracts a heavy toll.
And obviously, this is explicitly shown in the emotional climax of the film in a beautiful scene where Thanos sacrifices his own daughter Gamora, the only thing he has ever loved, in exchange for the Soul Stone.
The stone demands a sacrifice. In order to take the stone, you must lose that which you love.
This isn't love.
I ignored my destiny once. I cannot do that again. Even for you. I'm sorry, little one.
In this way, the closest thing we can feel to sympathy for a murderous tyrant comes to fruition. After seeing what he is willing to give up for his perceived destiny, after seeing that this monster is capable of losing what he loves, it's hard to cast aside those emotions that you feel simply because Thanos is evil. In the latter parts of the film, he even shows respect for his adversaries, which shows the intricacies of his character.
You have my respect, Stark. I hope they remember you.
Thanos is a madman and without question deserves to be stopped by the Avengers, but he is a madman that warrants some level of sympathy, even in a microscopic amount. I was floored about how Josh Brolin's brilliant performance, some mind-blowing CGI, and above all, a meticulously and emotionally written story could make a 13-foot-tall giant emotionally grounded and complex. Thanos' willingness to do anything for his goal, even the death of everything he's ever loved, affirms his place, in my view, as a perfectly written character, which makes the conclusion of the film so peculiar and so brilliant.
You should have gone for the head.
It's rare that a villain ever succeeds. It's rare when the hero's efforts fall short in comparison to the power of the villain. And it's even rarer that when that villain wins, it instills a strange sense of calm. The ending of the film is what cements Thanos as a transcendent villain in not just the superhero genre, but in all of cinema. Throughout the entire film, the audience has gone through a turbulent spread of emotions towards Thanos. We've hated him, slowly grown to understand him, perhaps even sympathize with him, and the film circles around those repeatedly. And when he finally snaps his fingers and decimates half of all life in the universe, there's no nuclear bomb to claim the lives of the innocent. The deed is done, and there's nothing the heroes can do to stop it. Well, at least in the remaining 4 minutes of runtime. While our beloved heroes are paralyzed with fear and confusion upon seeing their friends vanish from the universe, our attention, or at least mine, wasn't focused on them. It remained where it was for the entirety of the film, on Thanos. As the film came to a close, seeing Thanos look upon the picturesque sunrise on a distant planet, as he foretold earlier to Doctor Strange, was an oddly unsettling experience. For one, the obvious realization surfaces that Thanos has to die for what he's done, and yet we remember the respect that he showed to those who fought valiantly against him. We remember that he sacrificed his own disciples to carry out his goal, and they were perfectly willing to do so. We remember that he has lost his daughter, the only thing he's ever loved. And we remember that he's finally been vindicated for the loss of his homeworld by carrying out his plan, his destiny. All this and more is put into the minds of the viewer with a subtle gesture of a smile. Hey everybody, thank you for watching this video. I hope I proved to you that Thanos is a perfectly written villain, and if you agree, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't, still share it, and we can get into debates in the comments section. So I wanted to give a thank you to my sponsor for this video. So if you've been with me from the beginning, my channel is obviously in its infant stages, but you may have noticed that in the beginning of this video, I showed a different logo from what I've had previously. And that's because of my good friend, Michael Penda. So Michael Penda runs an independent graphic design firm called Michael Penda Designs. He does some cutting edge work with making logos and icons and graphics and any other kind of images you may need for a business or hobby or what have you. So if a graphic or logo for your business or hobby is something that you're interested in, please go to his Instagram page at peanutfreepanda, subscribe and shoot in some DMs and show him some love. He does fantastic work at a really competitive price, so please check him out. And I will see y'all next time. This is Johnny, the Lone Chemist, signing off.